said that today, how long would he keep his job? By the way, you ought to go read the old newspapers. I mean, like 100 years ago, and see how they talked about the Indians as being savages. They always referred to them as savages, like they're inferior somehow. Darwin said in his book, "Thus from the war of nature, from famine and death, the most exalted object we are capable of conceiving, the production of higher animals, directly follows." See, Darwin's philosophy was messed up. He thought the more war, the more famine, the more death you have, the faster things evolve. The question is really very simple. Did man bring death into the world? Or did death bring man into the world? Could not be more opposite. Darwin's philosophy says death brought man into the world. Now, you have to understand, in 1859, when this book came out, slavery was legal in many parts of the world. By the way, there's still slavery going on today in many parts of the world. Okay? Negroes were bought and sold like cows. You owned them like property. You could do with them as you please. They had absolutely no rights. Now, Henry Fairfield Osborn, who was the curator at the American Museum of Natural History, said, "The standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of the 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapien." He's trying to get across the idea that Negroes are a different species, isn't he? That's racism. Stephen Gould admitted, biological arguments for racism may have been common before 1850, but they increased by orders of magnitude following the acceptance of evolution theory. Thomas Huxley was the guy who promoted Darwin all over the country. Darwin wrote his book and went and hid. Huxley went out and really preached Darwin and made people accept what he said. Huxley said, "No rational man, cognizant of the facts, believes that the average Negro is the equal, still less the superior, of the white man." These are the guys who promoted Darwin. A guy named Kingsley, who was an Anglican priest who really promoted Darwin. Also, you know, if it hadn't been for the church accepting Darwin in the 1850s and 60s, the scientists rejected it at first. They said, "What a dumb theory." It was the Christians that accepted it. Kingsley said, "The black people of Australia, exactly the same race as the African Negro, cannot take in the gospel. They can't get saved." He said, "All attempts to bring them to a knowledge of the true God have as yet failed utterly. Poor brutes in human shape, they must perish off the face of the earth." They're inferior species. Brother, I was working in Longview, Texas at a church there. I was out 2 in the morning going to the store to get my wife some milk or something. I forget what it was, and I get one of the babies something at that time. And some guy had gotten drunk, and he turned his car down what he thought was a street, but it was a railroad track. He drove about, 30 feet, and the car bottomed out, and he's stuck on the tracks, And he's standing out there looking at his car. What happened here, He's drunk. And so I stopped to go see what I could do to help, and another guy stopped, and we're pushing this car back off the railroad tracks before a car comes along and turns it into a tin can, And this guy said, "What are you doing out here in the middle of the night?" It was an all-black neighborhood, right by the big ghetto housing project there. I said, I came by here to see if any of my friends are up, because I know a bunch of people here in the housing project in the ghetto here, and I bring a lot of these folks to church." He said, "You bring them to church?" I said, "Yeah, I drive a bus, come in here every Sunday, bring a lot of them to church." He said, "These people are all black." I said, "Yeah, so what?" He said, "Well, why do you bring them to church?" I said, "Well, I try to get them saved and, help them learn the Bible and go just like Jesus told me to do." He said, "What do you mean get them saved? They don't have souls." I said, "Are you part of the KKK?" He said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" "Oh, just a lucky guess, Well, listen, you idiot, they do have souls as much as you do. The color of your skin makes no difference. In Part 7, we talk about where the races come from. There aren't any races. There's one race called the human race. Now, there are different skin colors. I can show you different skin colors of cows, too. Black cows, brown cows, and white cows. But they all look the same in the meat locker. And they all taste the same on the hamburger, okay? And all humans are the same, regardless of the color of their skin. Here's the Mormon Church's teaching, though, about Negroes. The Mormon Church teaches, Negroes in this life are denied the priesthood. Negroes are not equal with other races. It's the Lord's doing. It's based on His eternal laws of justice and grows out of a lack of spiritual valiance of those concerned in their first estate. When I was living over on Burgess Road, I had 2 Mormon missionaries come knock on my door. They said, "Mr. Hovind, we'd like to talk to you about the Lord." I said, "That'd be great. Which Lord would you like to talk about, yours or mine?" He said, "Oh, we worship the same God." I said, "No, we don't." I said, "Tell me, fellas, does your God have a body like mine?" They said, "Oh, yeah." I said, well, my Bible says God's a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. See, if He has a body, He can only be in one place at a time. But if He's a spirit, He can be in all places at all times, simultaneously. I said, does your God live on the planet Kolob, K-O-L-O-B? They said, yeah, we believe He does. I said, does your God have thousands of wives? They said, yeah, we believe He does. I said, does your God have normal physical relations with those wives and beget spirit babies in heaven? They said, yeah, we believe He does. I said, now, do you guys believe that if the spirit baby is a valiant spirit baby, if it's a good spirit baby in heaven, when it comes to earth, it gets a white-skinned body? But if it's a bad spirit baby, it gets a black-skinned body. Is that what you believe? They said, well, you're not supposed to know that, but yeah, that is what we believe. By the way, that is what they believe. I said, now, fellas, let me see if I understand this. Now, your God in heaven supplies a spirit baby for every human baby born on earth. Is that right? They said, that's right. I said, okay, fellas, now listen. I know you have the little tag that says elder, even though you're 17. But I said, fellas, I've been married 30 years now. I got 3 kids. I've got grandkids. I taught biology and anatomy. I used to raise hamsters. I said, did you know there are 2 babies born every second? 2 per second. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I said, and your God supplies a spirit for every one. When does He get time to answer your prayers? Boy, they knocked the dust off their feet, and I guess I was anathema from then on because they never came back. I don't know. I wanted to talk to them some more, but they didn't want to talk to me no more. That's a dumb idea that you could black spirit babies up in spirit babies in heaven. This is dumb. This is crazy. Okay? It's not true. We're all equal. This Mormon apostle said, in a broad sense, caste systems have their root and origin in the gospel. It's by divine decree. He said, Cain, Ham, and the whole Negro race have been cursed with black skin, the mark of Cain. That is just silly, okay? This Mormon apostle said, if there's one drop of Negro blood in my children, as I've read to you, they receive the curse. The curse of black skin. That's dumb. He said, shall I tell you the law of God in regard to the African race? If the white man who belongs to the chosen seed mixes his blood with the seed of Cain, the penalty under the law of God is death on the spot. This will always be so. By the way, you ought to read the book, The Secret History of the Mormon Church. Get the phone number there. Go to the website, UTLM, UtahLighthouseMission.org. If you want to get all the lowdown on how the Mormons have killed people for trying to leave the Mormon Church or for marrying someone who's not the right color. Now, I know I'm in the South, and I preach the same message all over the South. But if you think you're superior because of the color of your skin, you're wrong, you're stupid, and you're not right with God.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, I've brought thousands of black people to the Lord. And I intend to keep doing it, okay? And they're going to be in heaven whether you like it or not. But during the slave trade time in America here, the slaves were packed onto ships and brought over like cows. I mean, it was common for 20% of them to die. They would bring them on the ship and chain them to the deck, and that's where they stayed for 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, they ate, slept, and went to the bathroom, same place, for 2 or 3 weeks. They didn't get up. Brought them over. Miserable, miserable conditions they brought them into, and then sold them over here like cows. Now, praise God for the good people who tried to take care of them. You know, some people really were good to their slaves. But the whole concept of slavery is based on the idea that one person is superior because of the color of his skin or because of what he believes. This is goes right back to the evolution teaching. Now, some people thought the Aborigines from Australia were inferior because they have bigger jaw bones, which is true. Their jaws are bigger. If you study the jaw of an Aboriginal, the bone structure is heavier. And people say, see, that's proof of evolution. No, it's not. The Aborigines are a nomadic society. They don't want to carry a toolbox around. So they carry the minimum with them. And when they get to where they got to go, they have to make their own tools again. And they use their teeth as a vice. They're constantly using their jaws as well as their hands, anything they've got, okay? And any bodybuilder will tell you, the more you build your muscles, the bigger the bones grow. So a person who's always using his jaws, his masseter muscles, is going to end up with bigger bones in response to that. After a lifetime of using your teeth like they do, you're going to have big jaw bones. It's got nothing to do with evolution. But somebody noticed this back 150 years ago and said, wow, the Aborigines have bigger jaw bones. So they went over and began robbing the graves of the Aborigines to get their heads for museums to be demonstrations for evolution. They treated the Aborigines awful. If you've seen the movie Quigley Down Under, where he brought people over there just to shoot the Aborigines, that kind of stuff really happened. They thought they were just, an animal. These two folks went to Australia to collect specimens for museums. Interesting story here in Creation magazine. They said right here, a New South Wales missionary was the horrified witness to the slaughter by mounted police of a group of dozens of Aboriginal men, women, and children. 45 heads were then boiled down and the best 10 skulls packed off for overseas. They shot them just to get their heads for museum displays. Now, why would a museum want a head with a bigger jawbone? As part of an evolution display. Did you know the Smithsonian, I've been told, has 33,000 sets of human remains in their basement right now? They call it the Army of the Potomac. They would find people with the right jaw structures and put them on display in their museum. See, boys and girls, how this ape evolved to the human? When the intermediates, there's another human. You can go downtown Pensacola and line up 10 people and prove the same thing, folks. We could line up folks in this room. Some of you have bigger jaws and smaller jaws and sloped forehead and straight forehead. I had an Italian friend one time. I said, man, I got to look at you from the side. I could put you in a textbook, you know. His head went back like that. His nose stuck out. I said, you're the perfect missing link. Guy had an IQ way up there in the stratosphere. Brilliant guy. Just had a dumb-looking head, you know. And by the way, the size of the head has got nothing, the brain has nothing to do with intelligence either. There have been some incredibly high IQ people with brain sizes down around 1,200 cc. And there have been some really dumb people with some really big heads with 2,000 cc brains, okay? It's got nothing to do with intelligence. America, though, during this late 1800s, because of the evolution theory primarily, had a large eugenics movement. Eugenics was the idea that we need to purify the race, get rid of the inferior genes, and only let the superior genes produce children. There was actually a sterilization movement. People who were mentally deficient were often sterilized. They couldn't have any children. There was a large eugenics movement until World War II broke out. Galton was Darwin's cousin, and Galton was Francis Galton, very influential in the eugenics movement. He said, is the study of the agencies under social control, eugenics is the study of the agencies under social control that improve or impair the racial qualities of future generations, either physically or mentally. That's Darwin's cousin. Now let's improve the race. Here's their logo and their motto, the tree of eugenics. Eugenics is the self-direction of human evolution. They're going to use medicine, surgery, psychiatry, sociology, religion, education, genealogy. They use it all. Like a tree, eugenics draws its materials from many sources and organizes them into a harmonious entity. They were going to work really hard to improve humanity by eliminating inferior genes. This is a person very involved in this was the one who started Planned Parenthood. We cover more on that on video number 4. In 1904, the World's Fair was held in St. Louis, Missouri. One of the displays on there was a huge display of many people involved in showing the evolution theory. Right here's a picture. At the 1904 World's Fair, 2,000 primitive peoples were put on display. The purpose of the display was to demonstrate the superiority of the white Americans who had evolved further. Peter Jennings, liberal Peter Jennings, wrote a book and mentioned this in there. And if you go to the St. Louis Zoo today, that is on the place where the World's Fair was held, and they're still using some of those same buildings. There in St. Louis at the 1904 World's Fair, they had a man in a cage with chimpanzees to demonstrate the evolution theory. The man was a pygmy from Australia, or a pygmy from Africa, little bitty pygmy, about 4'5", I think he was. Ota Benga was his name. Ota had a wife and 2 kids. They put him in a cage with chimpanzees. He went insane and killed himself. Why would they do that to somebody? Well, if you believe in evolution, man's just an animal. Even President Roosevelt, as good a man as he was in many ways, was caught up into this false thinking. Roosevelt thought that the Indians were an inferior species. Roosevelt said, I wish very much the wrong people could be prevented entirely from breeding. Roosevelt thought the immigrants from Europe, Scotland, Ireland, and the Orient were a threat to American society. How many of you have ancestors from one of those places? Just about everybody in the room. Yep, you're a threat to American society because you have inferior genes. That's what he thought. In 1871, Congress scrapped all treaties with the Indians and moved them off to the reservation system, still in use today. They made promises to the Indians and broke them. After all, they're only savages, they're inferior. The Trail of Tears took place before Darwin's book came out, but still evolution was very much taught before Darwin's book. Darwin just simply made it popular. But in the Trail of Tears, the Cherokee Indians were moved off their land by force to Oklahoma. About a third of them died along the way. Sam Houston married a Cherokee bride. He was really upset about what's going on with the white people picking on these Indians for no reason other than they thought they were an inferior species, which goes right back to the evolution teaching. When they took the Indians out of Ross's Landing, Tennessee, they moved the Indians out 2 weeks before harvest time. They did all the work, planted the crops, tended them all summer long. Just before harvest time, came in with soldiers and guns, loaded them into wagons, and moved them out. And of course, the white people moved into their houses, already made, crops ready to harvest. Man, pretty nice. So people would forget about what happened, this horrible slaughter of the Indians. They renamed the city. It used to be called Ross's Landing after Chief Ross. Now they call it Chattanooga. Renamed to honor, or to make people forget what happened. Here's an article from Franklin College in Franklin, Indiana. The Carnegie Institute of Washington, Eugenics Record Office, founded by Mrs. E.H. Harriman. Anybody heard that name before? E.H. Harriman. How many saw Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? He's getting ready to blow up the train, and he said, "I work for Mr. E.H. Harriman." Super rich gazillionaire back in those days. Very much involved in wanting to improve humanity by eliminating the inferior. Carnegie started the organization now in Berkeley, California, that fights to keep creation out of schools. It's his funding that supplied the start of that organization. The whole idea that man is superior, there's a bunch of guys been involved in this. The Bible says, have we not all one Father? You're not superior because of the color of your skin. The Bible says, He hath made of one blood all nations of men to rule on the earth. Now Darwin thought that a married man was a poor slave, worse than a Negro. Regardless, we won't comment on whether it's true or not, but if it's not, by the way. But if a professor said that today, how long would he keep his job? Or his life? Some of these feminazis would go kill him, wouldn't they? And yet they praise Darwin in our school system. Louisiana, I don't know if they got it passed or not. They were working on a bill to ban the teaching of Darwin because of his racism. Very interesting approach. Yeah. I mean, if our school started teaching the teachings of Adolf Hitler and made it mandatory reading, wouldn't people get upset? Well, why aren't they upset about the mandatory teaching of Darwinism? Darwin said, the chief distinction of intellectual powers between the two sexes is shown by man's attaining to a higher eminence in whatever he takes up. Whether requiring deep thought, reason, or imagination, or merely the use of the senses and hands, the average mental power in man must be above that of woman. Darwin finally married his first cousin, Emma Wedgwood. Nobody else would take him. Darwin thought men were superior in every single way. Darwin believed in inbreeding, so he married Emma, his first cousin. He wanted to raise a superior stock of children. He ended up having 10 children. Mary died shortly after birth. Anne died at 10. Robert was born retarded and died at 19 months. Henrietta had a serious nervous breakdown at 15. 3 of his other 6 sons were ill so often, Charles regarded them as semi-invalids. So much for inbreeding, Charlie. Evolution is the foundation for communism. Communism, started by a guy named Karl Marx, removes God from authority and puts man in his place. He says there is no God, so man must be in charge. Missionaries have said when they're working in a country and the communists take over, the first thing the communists do when they come into the country, they go into the schools and they start teaching communism? No. They start teaching evolution. They start by laying a foundation of evolution, and then they bring in the teachings of communism. Communism can't thrive in a place where people believe they've got rights that come from the Creator. And the creation movement in America is one of the biggest hindrances to the advancement of the New World Order. And they very much would like to get rid of guys like me who don't believe in evolution. The guy who founded the ACLU, the American Communist Lawyers Union, or the Anti-Christian Lawyers Union, whatever it is, Roger Baldwin said communism is the goal. You ought to read the history of the founding of the ACLU. One of the purposes of that lawyers' movement was to advance the cause of communism. Karl Marx, whose real name was Moses Mordecai Marx Levy, alias Karl Marx, when he was 17 years old, he wrote a beautiful paper telling how much he loved the Lord. High school graduation, he had a paper saying, man, I want to serve God with my life. Then he went off to college. He studied philosophy, and a college professor turned him away from God and turned him on to the teaching of evolution and destroyed Marx's whole philosophy of life. Karl Marx was destroyed by this teaching. You know, 75% of kids from Christian homes that go off to secular schools lose their faith. I meet them by the hundreds all year long. Some college professor destroys their faith. Karl Marx later in life said, my objective in life is to dethrone God and destroy capitalism. Marx based his whole philosophy of communism on the idea of evolution. Karl Marx even tried to dedicate his book to Charles Darwin. From a sincere admirer, Karl Marx. Marx knew his theories would not survive without evolution as the foundation philosophy. They go together hand in glove. Karl Marx had 6 children. 3 died of starvation in infancy. 2 others committed suicide. When Marx died, only 6 people attended his funeral. But his philosophy is still ruling 1/3 of the planet today. You know, 1/3 of the people on planet Earth are under communism right now. Started by a loser who never worked a day in his life, let his own kids starve to death. He was a loser. Karl Marx developed what we call the Communist Manifesto in 1848. You want to take over a country? Here's how communism works. First thing you do is abolish private property. And by the way, this is the real purpose behind the environmental movement in America. They're not trying to save the environment. Some probably are. But the basic idea behind the movement is abolish private property. You got to get their permit to cut down your tree. That's where it's headed, folks. The Bible talks about private property ownership quite a bit. You know, every 50 years you got your property back. You could not lose it forever. Your family's going to get it back. If you're a loser, you're lazy or whatever, you don't pay your bills and they take it away, your family will get it back every 50th year. The Bible talks about having his own vine and his own fig tree. Drink water out of your own cistern, running waters out of thine own well. You know, the solution to pollution in America is private property ownership. Ask anybody that's ever owned a house and rented it out to somebody else. They will understand. Renters don't look at property the same way owners do. How many know what I'm talking about? Okay, there you go. And the more property the government owns, the worse pollution is going to get. Peter Burrell, the president of the National Audubon Society, said, we reject the idea of private property. Well, he's got a good communist philosophy along with Bill Clinton and Hillary. Here's a pledge of allegiance put up at a public school in Massachusetts. Look at this carefully. I pledge allegiance to the earth, which I do love and depend on, and to all life and land, air and sea, which is as much a part of earth as me. At a 3rd grade school in Wisconsin, here's the pledge the kids say. I pledge allegiance to the world, to care for earth, sea, and air, to honor every living thing with peace and justice everywhere. 3 days ago, I was speaking in Minnesota, and I got to see this young man again who's now grown up. But he told me a couple of years ago, Jacob did, he said, Brother Hovind, when I was in 3rd grade at Johnsville Elementary School in Blaine, Minnesota, his teacher, Ms. Klobhockey, took down the American flag and made the kids pledge to the earth instead. Well, Ms. Klobhockey, I will buy you a one-way ticket to the Soviet Union on the condition you use it and you don't come back. Call me anytime. I'll buy you one. I've been to communist countries, folks. Trust me, you don't want what they've got. Now, America has lots of problems, I understand. But I love my country, folks. I fear my government, but I love my country. There are basically 2 philosophies of government. One is based on evolution thinking, which says laws come from man's opinion. How do you decide right from wrong? Oh, man gets together and we decide. Second thing, they say rights are granted by the government, and the government should be the provider. The government provides everything. This is called a democracy. Democracies always become dictatorships. They are horrible forms of government. The government should provide everything. When they were debating about health care here in Pensacola, I heard on the radio, several years ago, talking about a national health care plan. I thought, did you know 70 to 80% of all health care costs are from self-induced problems? Somebody wants to drink or smoke or take drugs, and when they get sick, they want me to pay for it? They were debating on the radio here, and one of the WCOA, I think it was, talking about should we have a national health care plan. So I called in. I said, I think it was Luke I said, hey Luke, I think we should have I got an idea here. I forget how I started off. I said, I forgot to change oil in my car. and I blew the engine. I think everybody should help me pay for it. They said, well, if you forgot to change oil and you blew your engine, that's your problem. I said, well, this is exactly the same idea with health care. If you don't want to take care of your health, I guess that's your business. But if you get sick, why should I have to pay for it? If you don't want to brush your teeth and floss your teeth, you do whatever you want. They're your teeth, but I'm not going to pay you to get you new ones. I got to take care of my own too, you know. If we're going to have universal health care, why not universal auto care? If you ever damage your car, the government will pay for it. How's that for an idea? How about universal house care? You got a problem with your house, you need new doors, you need new carpet, hey, the government will pay for it. How about the government pay all utility bills?
I like that one.
You don't have to yell at your kids anymore. Shut the refrigerator. Do you realize what would happen in a hurry? The whole system would crumble. That's what the Canadians are just now trying to figure out. Wow, how come it's costing us so much for this health care? I haven't had any health insurance now for 14 years. I take my vitamins. A lot of them. I probably spend 40, 50 bucks a month on vitamins and nutrition for me and my wife. Wow, that's a lot of money. Cheaper than $400 a month for health insurance, isn't it? And boy, when you get sick, it's neat. You go to the hospital, they have to do something, some kind of surgery. I remember one of my boys had surgery, and the hospital bill was like $4,500, for 2 hours in an outpatient place. So I called the different people. I called the anesthesiologist. I said, hello, sir, I notice your bill here is $1,500 for an hour and a half, put him to sleep. I don't have any insurance. I do pay my bills, and I'll pay whatever I have to, but that seems kind of high for an hour and a half, He said, oh, you don't have insurance? Okay, let's make it $300. Just like that over the phone. I called the place that had the room, I'm sure they had to change the sheets and put some new Band-Aids out and stuff, and I said, listen, I saw your bill here was like, $1,800. That seems kind of high for an hour and a half, for your room. I said, I don't have any insurance. They said, oh, you don't? Okay, let's make it $400. I got the bill down from, I think, $4,500 down to about $1,000, just over the phone with 5 phone calls. You don't have insurance? Oh, okay. The more people have insurance, the more it raises the price of everything. Now, I'm not against health insurance, okay, but I'm saying the philosophy here is what's important to understand. We got this crazy idea that the government's supposed to provide everything. Well, they'll be glad to do that, but along with that, they're going to take away all your freedoms. Our founding fathers said, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. For instance, who gives you the right to have a church? Then why do we ask the government for permission? Just about every church in America now has become 501c3 incorporated because they want to get a government handout. You ought to get the book Hush Money, or the bigger version of it, In Caesar's Grip, by Peter Kershaw, a good friend of mine. You want to find out all the dangers of 501c3 incorporation. The church doesn't have to get incorporated, but if you do get incorporated, you better not preach against certain things from your pulpit. Did you know if you're an incorporated church and you preach against homosexuality, IRS will pull your tax-exempt status? Churches are tax-exempt anyway. What are we asking them that for? Come on. I'll read the book if you want more on that. Patrick Henry said, it cannot be emphasized too strongly that this great nation was founded by Christians, not on religions, but on the gospel of Jesus Christ. See, the other philosophy of government is based on creation thinking, which says laws come from the Creator, rights are unalienable, and the government should be limited to the punishment of evildoers and defense, the only 2 legitimate functions of government. They're not supposed to provide everything for you. You ought to read Davy Crockett's story about, he's out, a neighborhood burned in Washington, D.C. when Davy Crockett was senator or something like that. And the senators got together and said, this whole neighborhood burned. What a horrible tragedy. Everybody lost their house here. Let's vote to give this neighborhood, $50,000, whatever it was way back then, to rebuild their homes. The next fall, Davy Crockett's out stumping, trying to get people to vote for him. And he saw this farmer plowing his field, and he stopped and said, hey, neighbor. The farmer stopped and said, yes, sir, can I help you? He said, I'm Davy Crockett. He said, yes, sir, I know who you are. He said, well, I want to see if you vote for me. The farmer said, no, sir, I'll never vote for you again in my life. He said, well, why not? He said, you broke your trust. He said, I voted for you last time to put you in there to manage things for our area, and you blew it. He said, well, how did I blow it? What did I do? He said, well, you voted to give those people money to rebuild their houses. Crockett said, well, yeah, that was a horrible thing that happened. A big fire swept through the community or something. And the farmer said, are you going to do this for every tragedy across America? What if I lose my crop? What if my cow dies? This is a slippery slope, folks. There's no way out of this one. You have no business to give away our money. Now, if you congressmen want to get together and pool your money and give those folks some money, you go ahead. We've entrusted you to manage our money. We've got the whole story. It's amazing. If you call us or email us, we'll send that to you. Davy Crockett said, boy, he learned his lesson. But the senators and representatives today do not understand that lesson. They love giving away your money. Long story on that. A republic, though, is based on the idea that the law is supreme. Our government started off to be a constitutional republic, not a democracy. And I get real nervous when I hear them talk about spread democracy around the world. It'd be the dumbest thing we could do. Talk about a dumb form of government. The second part of Karl Marx's plan was a heavy progressive income tax. Don't get me started on that one, okay? The third thing he said was abolish the rights of inheritance. The Bible says a good man leaves inheritance to his children's children. Everything about communism is backwards to the biblical plan for things. Number 4, confiscate property rights. Take away the property. The Bible says the love of money is the root of all evil. Karl Marx said we need a central bank. He knew full well a central bank could destroy the country. And in 1913, some rich guys got together on Jekyll Island, Georgia, and tricked everybody with the Federal Reserve. Nothing federal about it, and there are no reserves. The Federal Reserve is a private bunch of bankers. Remember, love of money is the root of all evil. Got a whole lot more on that in our college class, CSE 103. Get a whole lot more on the Federal Reserve. We better skip some for sake of time here. Number 6, government ownership of communication. That's why we have an FCC, Federal Communication Commission. And government ownership of transportation. That's why we now have the TSA, the Transportation Security Administration. I go to the airports. I flew 175 times last year. I'll break that this year. I go to the airports and there'll be 50 people standing around, you know, to check everything. I went once and they took my fingernail clipper out, this big. It had a little thing that swings out to clean your fingernails. They said, oh, can't have that. It broke it off. You got to be kidding. I'm going to take over a plane with a fingernail clipper. They're paranoid. Number 7, government ownership of factories and agriculture. Number 8, government control of labor. Number 9, corporate farms and regional planning. Number 10, free education. You know, the public school idea came from Karl Marx. Now, there were public schools before that, I understand, but Karl Marx said the government should do free education for everybody. Well, my PhD's in education. My mom taught for years and retired. My brother's in his 34th year now teaching public school. I speak in hundreds and hundreds of schools across the world. Folks, I'm for education, but I'm dead set against government involvement in education. The government's got no business being involved in education at all. You better read your Constitution, the 10th Amendment. Unless that's spelled out in that document, the government shouldn't do it. We've gotten a long ways away from that. Hitler said, you let me control the textbooks, I'll control the state. Martin Luther said, I am much afraid that the schools will prove to be the great gates to hell unless they diligently labor in explaining the Scriptures, engraving them in the hearts of youth. He said, I would advise no one to place his child where the Scriptures do not reign paramount. Every institution in which men are not increasingly occupied with the Word of God must become corrupt. Well, go walk the halls of the schools, folks. I'm telling you, they have become corrupt. Here's a 1777 public school book, first grade. Here's what they taught the kids in first grade in America. Used in public, private schools. It's a first grade textbook. Here's how they learn the alphabet. In Adam's fall, we sinned all. Back then they made the S like a letter F, okay? Heaven to find, the Bible mind. Christ crucified, for sinners died. The deluge drowned the earth around. Elijah hid, the ravens fed. The judgment made Felix afraid. Public school textbook. Interesting. Here's how the youth, young people, learn their alphabet. A wise son maketh a glad father. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. Come unto Christ, all ye that labor and heavy laden. Do not the abominable thing which I hate, saith the Lord. That's a public school textbook, folks. Guess what they teach the kids today? You're an animal. Share a common heritage with earthworms. Here's a textbook that has over 100 pages devoted to evolution theory. Not one mention of creation or God any place in the book. Not one. What has happened, folks? The United Nations has already declared They had a World Declaration on Education for All in 1990, called for the nations of the world to adopt a common education system, complete with implementation timetables and recommended curriculum. In our own nation, Goals 2000, School to Work, and the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, Profiles of Learning, are totally consistent with the One World Government recommendations of the 1990 UN Declaration. You ought to get hold of Bob Fry in Minnesota. We'll put his address up here, and you can call Bob about more stuff on the... He's very involved in fighting this type of thing right here. A humanist said in the Humanist magazine, John Dunfree said, "The battle for mankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their roles as proselytizers of a new faith that will replace the rotting corpse of Christianity." This guy said, "Every child who enters school at age 5 is mentally ill because he comes to school with allegiance toward our elected officials, founding fathers, institutions, government, patriotism, nationalism, sovereignty. All these prove the child is sick because the well individual is one who has rejected all those things and is what I call the true international child, communist, of the future." Dr. Pierce from Harvard University. Well, Dr. Pierce, I'll buy you a one-way ticket also to the Soviet Union if you use it and don't come back. I've been over there, folks. You don't want what they've got. Here's a social science book, public school book. They said any child who believes in God is mentally ill. Education is the most powerful ally of humanism, and every American public school is a school of humanism. What can the theistic Sunday school, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching? They're right, folks, and they're winning. We're losing. One professor said, "As a matter of fact, creationism should be discriminated against. No advocate of such propaganda should be trusted to teach science classes or administer science programs anywhere, under any circumstances. Moreover, if they are now doing so, they should be dismissed. You should fire them if they believe in creation." An Iowa professor said, "You should fail any student, no matter what the grade record indicate, if the professor discovers the student is a creationist. Furthermore, the student's department should have the right of retracting the grades and possibly even degrees if the student becomes a creationist later." That's the kind of thinking we're up against. Mr. Yefremov lives here in Pensacola. He came to my house several years ago. He's from Ukraine. He said, "Dr. Hovind, here's my high school diploma." I said, "Yeah? You know, you're 50 years old, you got 5 kids, a couple of, 4 in college. Why are you handing me your high school diploma?" He said, "When I was in Ukraine, I went to school, had good grades. They grade them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5's the best." He showed me his report card, all 5s, like straight A's. He said, "But we had a test to take before we could graduate. Senior year in high school, one of the questions on the test was, 'Do you believe in evolution?' I answered, 'No.' They refused to let me graduate." I said, "Well, how'd you get the diploma?" He said, "Oh, you remember last year when we made your videotapes in Russian and he did the voice on them?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I sent them to my village where I grew up in Russia. The mayor watched them, made all the city council watch the tapes, and they said, 'Wow, Eugene went to America and became a movie star.'" They put him in the public school to make all the public school kids watch him. The kid who was there, the guy who refused to let him get his diploma 35 years ago, had now become a city councilman. And the mayor said, "Oh, go ahead and send him his diploma." "Okay, yes, sir." He said, "I just got my diploma in the mail. What do you think, Brother Hovind?" I said, "Wow." What a story. See, the humanists have decided years ago they're going to use the education system to spread their evolution and humanism, because that way we pay for it. We're paying to spread their religion. So what's going on, folks? Communism is anti-Christian in every single way. The communists have 8 rules for revolution, different ways, there's different things they want to do to take over a country. We don't have time to go over them all now. I have to cover that some other time, or get our college class, CSE 103, where we cover this in much more detail. Evolution is the foundation philosophy for Nazism. Why did Hitler do what he did? Well, we'll cover that tomorrow night. It's the foundation for Nazism, communism, socialism, Marxism, and the New World Order. Coming soon. We'll talk about that tomorrow night. Very politically incorrect. You don't want to come tomorrow. And then we'll tell you what you can do about it. Amen. Coming next. Well, welcome to the last session on what's on our videotape number 5 about the effects of the evolution theory. How that evolution is responsible for the rise of communism, Marxism, socialism. And tonight we're going to talk about Nazism, the last one, and then the New World Order. Then we're going to tell you, what do you do about it? Our world is quite obviously falling apart. What are we going to do? Nazism is based on the philosophy of evolution. You have to think one race is superior to another. But Mussolini, the Italian dictator, thought that the Italians were the superior race, and everybody else should be eliminated. Of course, Hitler felt the same way. He thought the Germans were the superior race. He believed in Aryan supremacy. Hitler believed the Germans were the superior race that deserved to rule the world. Everybody else was just taking up room. The German Führer consistently sought to make the practice of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. This fellow said a direct line runs from Darwin through the father of eugenics movement, Darwin's cousin Francis Galton, to the extermination camps of Nazi Europe. Exactly right. In Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, you can read his racist philosophy. It just kind of oozes off every page. Adolf Hitler's mind was captivated by evolutionary thinking, probably since he was a boy. Evolutionary ideas lie at the basis of all that is worst in Mein Kampf and in his speeches. Hitler offered to send the Jews to anybody who would take them. He said, "You want these Jews? I'll send them to you." I read a lot about Hitler and the Holocaust. You ought to read the book While 6 Million Died and see what the rest of the world did. Did you know Hitler offered to send the Jews to America and Roosevelt refused to let him? Unbelievable what happened, folks, during before World War II. In Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, on page 286 in this edition, he said, "Even less does nature desire the blending of a higher with a lower race." Who's a higher and a lower race, Adolf? Hitler kept talking about the Aryan blood and lower peoples. Well, who's an Aryan anyway? Well, I found Hitler's hit list. I was reading in Keene State University, New Hampshire. I was doing some research in their library there one time, and I found they got a whole section of the library just about Hitler and the Holocaust. I thought, wow, I was in hog heaven. So I asked the librarian, why did Hitler kill the Jews? Why not somebody else? He said, oh, I'll show you the list he was using. He brought me book after book after book. For 6 hours, I copied $20 worth of pages, 10 cents at a time, out of that library. Here's the list Hitler was using. Hitler thought the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Nordic were close to pure Aryan, the superior race. Did you get all that? Blonde hair, blue-eyed, Norwegian, vården står det till idag. Ja, sure, you betcha. Oofta. And he thought the Germans were mostly Aryan. The Mediterraneans are slightly Aryan. The Slavics are half Aryan, half ape. The Orientals are slightly ape. The black Africans are predominantly ape. And the Jews are close to pure ape. Hitler killed the Jews because he honestly thought he was speeding up the process of evolution by eliminating what he thought were the inferiors. If he would have killed all the Jews, guess who would have been next? Blacks. Hitler hated black people. Does anybody know where the Olympics were held in 1936? Berlin, Germany. Does anybody know who won the most gold medals? Jesse Owens, the black American athlete. Hitler was so angry, he said, it's not fair to make my men race against this animal. One of the Jewish prisoners who survived the